this is our blueprint. It explains in one diagram the services that we offer. Our motto at the moment is putting the profit into non-profits, and I'll explain why. You probably picked up by now that Bruce is Batman. He's personified Batman since he was about 6 years old and would run around the garden with a cape after watching the I won't even say what year, that'll age Bruce. You know, the old TV Batman series. So he's always been Batman, and so we needed a persona for me, which then became Wonder Woman. So starting in the center of our blueprint, you'll see our logo, which is the Batman bat with the Wonder Woman symbol in gold. And so that's how we've sort of branded ourselves as superheroes for nonprofit success. So each of the swords represents one of us, and they are specifically distinct because we are each distinct. My experiences with nonprofit organizations and Bruce's experiences with startups and developing entrepreneurs and starting businesses. So we each have a very unique perspective on the services that we bring, and so that goes through our shield. Then you'll see that after the circle with our logo in it, you have the dark hexagon here, Bruce, that's what it is. Mm-hmm. And you'll see that that doesn't fit in with the circular perspective of everything else, because that is our process for helping organizations to start their own businesses. And a business is a little bit of a square peg in a round hole in a nonprofit, and we help you to fit that in, to make sense out of it and to fit it into a broader context. So you'll see that the circle beyond that are the areas that make up the nonprofit organization and how your business model can fit within that nonprofit. So taking a step further right out to the edge and then bringing back in again, we offer 3 services. So we do business development, where as a nonprofit you're wanting to start a business from scratch. Any kind of income generating arm, doesn't have to be a separate legal entity. I know that Tim's organization has a separate legal structure, but you can consider, you know, charging for workshops or some kind of business activity income generation within your organization. If you're doing that from scratch, then we put you through our business development process. If you already have a business, we look at the business improvement. And then the third one is, if that's not really the area that you want to look at and you have some particular challenges within your operating model, either as an operating model as a whole, does this make sense for you as an organization? Have you evolved in such a way that now you have this disjointed pieces of an organization that doesn't make sense? Or is there a specific activity that or a function that needs to be engaged with? Gabriel's organization, I've assisted there looking at the financial functions of the organization, and that would fit within the operating model. So for every one of these services, the way that we engage with the client is threefold, and that's the next circle inwards. We start with a review. So we have a look at what is there already, what is the way that people are working, what is it that is needed. Then we collaborate with the organization in building strategy. What is it that you're actually wanting to achieve? And let's articulate that. Let's really document it. Let's have a clear plan of action of how we are going to achieve that. And then the third part is the implementation. So often, particularly when it comes to sort of business development and so forth, the organization has its own infrastructure to take that business forward. And we're not running your business for you. But there are instances where there is some level of implementation that is required, some level of accompaniment of the process, walking the journey, helping with the mindset changes, helping with the thinking through, and we do that. Often when it comes to operating model things, particularly when it comes to financial management stuff, the implementation requires an Excel spreadsheet. And if you've listened to anything we've spoken about before, you'll know that Excel spreadsheets are my happy place. And so that implementation I'm quite happy to do for you, to whip up a spreadsheet that has lots of fancy formulas in it. So it depends on the type of service that you are engaging, and then how to the level of implementation that we involved in helping you process that. So I hope that gives you just a broad overview of the three business areas or the three areas that we support nonprofits, and gives you a sense of our process and the particular business functions that we look at for a nonprofit and for a business model. And then Bruce has found this lovely quote, which I think is just beautiful, that a bend in the road is never fatal until you fail to take it. So we are facing a bend in the road, and we have the option to stand still in the road, to keep going straight, or to navigate that turn. And when it comes to things like income sources, investigating alternative income sources and thinking outside the box and taking a left turn, a short left, to go and explore something different is definitely a journey that we will take with you. So there you go. That gives you a little bit more about who we are and what we focus on. Developing business arms within nonprofit organizations.
So I just want to take you through a proposed model that we've been working on, and just looking at kind of where we are and what we're doing. And a lot of what we do with our clients is this thing called strategy. And I want to share with you a strategy framework. So it's not a strategy in itself, it's purely a framework, but it's been adjusted. We've looked at where we are and we've looked at where we're going to be, and we've come up with a different kind of fix on some of what we should be doing as leaders of industry and NPOs and organizations and communities. So in the middle, we've got this lonely like NPO strategy, this little red pill that kind of floats around, and maybe it's in a document, maybe it's in our heads, maybe it's something we've spoke about, but there's very few people that can pull out and say, there's our 3-year strategy. This is what we've got. This is how we're going to unplug that. And even if we did have something in writing, maybe now it's not relevant anymore. And we've just converted a web-based NPO that does web articles for school leavers on the career choices, and now they're a feeding scheme. So we've been able to repurpose a lot of their work, and to be able to refocus a fair amount of the efforts into that. So it's interesting is that your strategy in February and the strategy in May are going to look very, very different. So what we've done, we've been able to wrap around that strategy 3 different R's that we're going to encourage everybody to look at. And it's all about retool, retribe, and refocus. And I'm going to unpack those in a little while. But behind that, obviously, is still the whole effort of the 7 areas: the planning, the impact, the projects, the structure, financial management, and resources that still need to be done within an organization. And then going back to what we offer, or what you can do for yourself, is obviously the review, develop a new strategy based on the new rules of engagement, and then the implementation as soon as possible. So we want to dive straight into these, just kind of unpacking the newfound level of strategy that we have. At the lower part of the screen, I've just put those 6 areas just as references back that we can go back and have a look at. But just some words of wisdom that we've been able to glean from many conversations over the last 5 weeks is, the first thing is we've got to learn to mourn the loss of our future plans. And a lot of us had these plans. A lot of us had, you know, the Africa burn for this week. Lorraine, I feel your pain. I really do. And we're speaking more and more people, whether it was just an Easter weekend holiday, or your future projects, or being able to bring in new staff, start new projects and stuff. We need to let go of that as leaders, as strategy creators and owners. We need to mourn the loss of those future plans. We need to let it go. And it's an interesting one here. Here is words from a psychologist, and she says, we've got to learn how to grieve a living loss. And grieving a living loss, it's not somebody that's died, it's not a company that's died. We're actually grieving a living loss each day. And there's an interesting article out at the moment, says that the issues that you're feeling, the discomfort that you're feeling, are feelings of grief. And there are many ways of grieving where we're at the moment. And I think one thing that we've got to do is we've got to allow ourselves to grieve the loss of our future plans, but then we need to get back on the horse as soon as possible and start developing a new future based on where we're going. So point number 2 is don't expect to get back to where it was before, because things are different, okay? And there's all these things, that's the new norm and it's never going to be the same again, and we have all that. And I think that is, you know, take what's relevant to you, but it's definitely not going to be what you were planning this year, and it's definitely not going to end up the way we think it's going to end up even now. So it's an interesting forward-looking where we're at. So how to develop a strategy on a future plan that doesn't yet exist, or we don't even know how to see. So I think a few other things: be ready to release and let go, develop long-term focuses with short-term strategy. So I think our long-term focus still needs to stand, going back to the Constitution, going back to what you stand for, going back to your long-term strategy. I think that needs still to stand, but the short-term strategy on how to get there needs to change. And we need to do it today. We can't sit there and say, well, when we get back, or when lockdown's finished, or when we get, you know, and things like that, because there is not going to be a date that we're going to say, okay, this is it. COVID's going to be with us forever, and we need to accept it until we get herd immunity and inoculations, and understand exactly where we're going with this. And I got a wonderful quote here from this morning, is that COVID-19 vaccine, is it forced contamination or injected salvation? And I thought there was an interesting kind of thing there. And I think that's what a lot of us are kind of looking around, is we're looking for someone to wave a magic flag and get that. But it's not going to be like that. We're always going to be in some form of quarantine. We're going to be separated for many, many more months, and it's going to be that. And then I've put number 6 there. We need to learn to turn our hands over. And I just want to share that with you, because someone told me that the other day, and I'm going like, yeah, whatever, you know, we turn our minds over, we turn our money over and stuff. And they said we need to turn our hands over. And they said too many people in the world are holding their hands out, like, please give us the grants, please give us the UIF stuff, please give us this money out of this fund and that fund, and if you give us this money, then we'll survive. And I think as leaders and as NPO strategists, I think one of the things we need to do, we need to turn our hand over from taking handouts to turn over and learn how to give. And I think if we are creating strategies to give, then we will get. And so I just want to really, really encourage you. A lot of people are sitting back and saying, well, how many forms do I need to fill in to get my hands on as much money as I can, so then we can survive this? Let's be a little proactive and unpack that with a new way of looking at the future. Okay, let's dive into the Retried. This is a couple of pointers here. We need to take stock of who and what is on our team. And I mean that with all due respect. I know a lot of people have got some brilliant people, and it's not a way to bring out the kind of sickle and carve out a new path. But there is a time, and I think this is a great time to do a little bit of press pause and reevaluate. And exactly, and it's not just who, but it's also what is on our team. So looking at those assets, do we really need an office? And that's something Michelle and myself have spoken about. Will we ever go back to our office in Woodstock? And those are the little things. Will we ever sign a lease again? And what is that going to look like? And what about computers? What about assets and motor vehicles and all those things? Are they going to be useful in the future? But in the same time, we need to be very mindful of where people are emotionally. And it's something that I'm becoming more and more aware of. Everybody is journeying down this avenue of grief, of adjustment, and it's very difficult to expect people to be in the same place we are when we speak to them. And following that is that we need to also become very mindful of our communication and communication back to our funders, donors, beneficiaries, team, project members, and just be very, very mindful of how we communicate and what that could be included at. And some clever advice here is always use video before text for clarity, because I can write an email to a group of people and I don't know where they are going to be emotionally and physically when they read it, and it could be taken out of context. But if I put them on a video call, at least we can have that conversation. It's not just a one-way broadcast. Try get people in two-way, and that's why Zoom and Zoom skills have become the new number one tool that we need to master and use with that. So become proactive in all our relationships. And I think as leaders, we need to be the ones to initiate conversation, to sit down with people and say, how are you? No, how are you really? Let's talk about this thing. Let me hear you. I've just closed off a session early this morning and just it got really emotional. At the end, we just closed off just by going around the room to say, you know, I see you, I hear you. And I can't fix you, I can't do anything with you at the moment, but I do see you where you're at. And I think that just gives validation for people of where they are and who they are at the moment. Also need to become really reliable. There's a lot of organizations that are trying to do too much and not being able to follow through. So take on what you can do and then follow through and make sure that if you say you're going to get food to people and help for people and say you're going to phone people back, the great Cape Town lie is I'll phone you, I'll call you back, I'll visit. And we become famous for that in Cape Town, unfortunately, and there's not that follow through and reliable. And I think those relationships need to be held in esteem at high priority and follow through with what we say and what we promise and what our website and the marketing material says. But we also need to let go of the unhealthy relationships. And now's a great excuse. We've got a brilliant opportunity to let go. It's time to prune and to say, sorry for you, I've lost your email, it's at the office, I didn't get it, and let go of unhealthy relationships, both financial relationships and could be funders, donors, beneficiaries, teams, friends, soon to be ex-friends. And I think it's a good time to cut loose of relationships. I'm pruning my Facebook account all the time. Any negative or anti this or anti that immediately gets cut, and all of a sudden Facebook is not such an emotional place to be because I've cut out all that bad stuff, and I'm doing it left, right and center at the moment. And we need to become new future focused on everything that we do. So that's kind of retribing, and retribing is like we have our tribe, let's use this opportunity to do a retribe and a refocus in what we're going to do. Yeah, let's jump into retool. And I'm a big one. It's not physical distancing. It should be physical distancing, not social distancing. And I think the world has made a huge mistake in this whole thing, and they've called it social distancing, and everybody just adopted it because it's got that. But we actually need physical distancing and social closeness. And we've got to learn how to use the social touching tools like Zoom and Facebook and WhatsApp and all these other things that we playing around with. I know schools are using MS Teams a lot now and Adobe Connect and et cetera, but learn how to use these tools to connect with people and to play around in the virtual world to get that social connection with people. So don't just send people an email or have a Zoom call with them, and create a level of contact. with your team. And now's also a chance to maybe stop doing the stuff that you suck at, okay? And turn your strengths into mastery. And you should be becoming expert at your strengths and not mediocre at your weaknesses. So any weakness that you have, and it might be a good time to do that trusted old tool, a SWOT analysis, and you take all those weaknesses and you outsource them. And more things like virtual assistances and collaborative teams and all that sort of stuff is definitely, it's a new age of working, and there's nothing saying that you can't then collaborate with other people across the different places. I was speaking to one guy yesterday. His virtual assistant is sitting in Singapore, and she works 20 hours a month for him, and never got to see her physically. They chat via Zoom and they email each other, and she does probably 80% of the work that he really hated, and it's a lot more efficient, and he's been able to revive a lot of his admin around that and get things done eventually. So some hints: always develop people before products, and I think again there everything needs to become people-centric and emotional-centric long before we have to develop products. So understanding the people and developing the products around the people instead of forcing the product onto the people. And develop programs and products and programs with the beneficiaries. And I think that whole collaboration tool is definitely a key structure going forward that we need to unpack and look at. Okay, the refocus, and I've got this wonderful thing, stop, drop and roll, and Michelle and myself were just chatting about this. This is what we learned from the firemen when they came to our school, even earlier as primary schools. If you're on fire, you need to stop, drop and roll. And it's an interesting thing. And I want to reiterate that at the moment, is that we need to just stop and maybe just pause for a moment instead of being caught up in the franticness of survival, and maybe just take a day out with our leadership team and just stop. And then we need to drop what we don't want and then roll with the stuff that we do. So a little play on words and a bit of fun there, but definitely a stop, drop and roll could be an interesting scenario that you could put up on a flip chart or a shared screen or something, and say, what are the stuff that we need to stop? What are the stuff that we need to drop? And what are the stuff that we need to roll with going forward? So with that, reviewing a risk opportunity register and mitigating those risks and seizing those new opportunities. And there are so many opportunities out in the marketplace that people aren't taking up. The latest one is mask production, and I see there's a flurry of people selling masks from 5 Rand to 150 Rand, depends on where you are and depends on how you can make them. And that's just an opportunity. If you weren't making masks 3 weeks ago, you're not going to seize that opportunity now, because that market is now a bit flooded and being taken over by a lot of things. And we need to become agile in our approach. And that word agile is, we need to be flexible, we need to be fast, we need to be able to get to the office in a moment's notice to be able to seize those opportunities. So as opportunities arise, we need to be agile in our approach and not sit there and say, you know, maybe we should put together a proposal document that we can review at our next board member, and then we'll put it to the vote, and then we'll review it, and then we'll get Michelle to do a spreadsheet for it, and then we'll review that and see what then we'll raise money for it, and 6 months later we might get it done. I think this age is called to be very agile, and we need to get it on it as soon as we can. Like writing a book in the first week of shutdown. That's brilliant. Well done, Tim. I think that's kudos to you to be able to do that. That's the agile approach that we like. And then acting with innovational intent. And we need to be innovational in everything that we do, coming up with something new. Don't just do the same old, same old. Stop again and say, is there a different way that this should be done? And then operate with intent and actually push forward with something with a sense of purpose. And I think that's just a little review on what that model looks like, just to give you a framework.